So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Elina Teplinski. I'm a partner at the Pillsbury law firm. Been in this industry for 20 years, and Pillsbury's been doing this for 60 years. And I'm super excited to see all of the energy in this room and all of the energy, pun intended, in Texas around nuclear. So mostly when people talk about new nuclear, talk about reactors, right? Large reactors, SMRs, microreactors, all of these new technologies. But of course, for all of these technologies to function, we need nuclear fuel, and we need ways to manage that nuclear fuel. And it's not only a necessity, it's also a great opportunity. The nuclear fuel industry, the fuel cycle industry, is an immense opportunity from an economic perspective, from an energy security perspective, and also from a technology innovation perspective. So I'm super excited to be moderating this panel today. We've got the entire nuclear fuel cycle represented. And of course, we'll talk about not just the fuel cycle, but also what this means for Texas, and all of the opportunity that we're creating here with this part of the nuclear industry. So let's start with production first. When I first started in this industry about 20 years ago, there was a real excitement about nuclear, and the uranium price soared. I remember the uranium price, the spot price for natural uranium was about $135. And then we went through a bit of a downfall with Fukushima and shutdown of reactors in a couple of countries, and with a bit of a slump. But now we're getting close to an all-time high again. I think today we're in the 80s again as far as spot uranium price. And with that, there also have been some geopolitical developments, the war in Ukraine, greater emphasis on energy security. So our thinking, I think, has really shifted both about what we need in terms of production globally, but especially what we need about production domestically. So I'll start with the question about, with the state of the uranium market today, what does this mean for domestic production?
Can you hear me? Okay, good. For domestic production, what we're seeing is a restart of production in the United States. As recently as a year ago, the effective production out of the United States is almost zero. We're a 100% importer of nuclear fuel, whether it's from Canada or from, at one point back in 2022, roughly 20% of our, almost 50% of our uranium that came into the country came to the port of St. Petersburg, Russia. That's a pretty big shift that we need to recenter, because one of the things that's come out of the geopolitical realization of where things are in the world is that the ability to get inexpensive uranium nuclear fuel from Central Asia, Russia, elsewhere is increasingly difficult, which really is, in my conversations with nuclear utilities in the United States, which is still the largest market in the world, its security of supply has risen to the top as being one of the big issues. And one thing you can get in the United States, you can get sanction-free uranium produced in the United States, transported without worries of limited ship transport from other ports. And that's why what we're seeing is much, much more interest in acquiring supply from domestic producers. And that's why our company, enCore, we restarted production in South Texas at 2 locations with the intention to grow. And we see this as an opportunity, but also it's the right thing to do, is to create a domestic source supply for national security and energy security for the United States. Brent?
Thanks, Paul. That's a good start. I agree with everything Paul said. The increase in prices really spurred production across the U.S. and starting with restarts. So similar to Paul, our company has restarted operations in Wyoming this fall with the Christensen Ranch Mine and Irigaray Central Processing Plant. And we also see some of our competitors that have restarted. UR Energy is operating in Wyoming in the Great Divide Basin. You see Peninsula is building a new central processing plant in northeast Wyoming. And not only are we restarting operations, but you also see an investment into greenfield projects. So we have a project in South Texas, the Burke Hollow project. that we started construction of the mine this year. We are refurbishing the Hobson Central Processing Plant, and we aim to be in production with that facility next year. So you're seeing a lot of capital being spent on new equipment, refurbishing equipment that's been idled since the last downturn, and a lot of it shut down since perhaps 2016, 17. But a lot of new investment in the space, and it's exciting times again in the uranium business.
I think the mic's not working. Oh, it's working again. Great. Just a follow-up question, I think, to the both of you. Can you tell us a little bit more about your projects in Texas? You mentioned, both of you have some developments here. And what do you see as the future for those projects in the next 10 years or so?
Well, in November 2023, we announced that we started up production at our Rosita project down in Duval County. For those who are familiar, it's about halfway between San Diego and Freer, and if you don't know where that is, I won't go anywhere further. And then in June, we started up operations in our Alta Mesa project down in Brooks County. And we just had a significant grand opening event where former President Bush came down and spoke at it. So it was pretty exciting times. But we see the future in Texas because there's a lot of opportunity for growth. Texas has been kind of undersold or undervalued in the uranium side of it because we don't have a lot of federal land, so that the federal, going out and getting federal claims, et cetera, which is something you can do in a lot of the western states. Here you have to negotiate with landowners to negotiate leases. In some of the cases, some of the best uranium properties may be on a lot of small landowner property. Anybody who's been doing oil and gas leasing know that can be a bit of a challenge. enCore has been blessed by the fact that our biggest asset, which is Alta Mesa, is located on a large ranch, which is owned by one landowner, one mineral owner, and all family members. So it's a really strong partnership there, and so we're advancing that. We see Texas as being our base source of production for our company for the next 10 to 15 years at minimum. Potentially much longer. We have assets around in South Texas, but we're continuing to add those because we see a lot of opportunity. Even though we have properties in South Dakota and Wyoming, we're also advancing. We see Texas as being the core of our business.
So am I on? Oh, there we go. Our project, the Burke Hollow project in South Texas, is, I believe, the only greenfield uranium center that's being brought into production today. We spent a number of years exploring, and we have over 11 million pounds of mineral resources in place for that project. As I mentioned, we just started construction this year of the well field, so the mining area, and as well as started construction of the satellite plant, ion exchange plant, this month. That loaded uranium resin will be shipped to our Hobson Central Processing Plant, which was a brownfield site that we're refurbishing and will be producing yellow cake. And again, we aim to bring that into production next year. And of course, we're headquartered in Corpus Christi, Texas, so it's an absolutely important project in our portfolio.
Great. So a lot of excitement on the production side. So let's go a little further up the fuel cycle. So you've got the production, right? The uranium is mined and milled, and then it's converted into UF6. And then we've got enrichment, which I think has been the talk of the town, especially in Washington, where I am for the past couple of years. Enrichment capacity, the prices for enrichment services are really down because the nuclear industry wasn't growing fast for a while. And now we've got all of this excitement about new reactors globally, and especially advanced reactors, which require a special higher enrichment, and they require low-enriched uranium that is enriched to a higher percentage, known as HALEU, high assay low-enriched uranium. Of course, the issue we have is that today there really is no domestic production of HALEU, and there's no Western production of HALEU to date. All the HALEU that we currently can obtain can only come from Russia or China, which are not great options for the United States. So there's been a lot of development in trying to develop that domestic production, and I wanted to turn it over to you, Jeff. TerraPower is a really interesting company where you are in all parts of the industry. Of course, you are a reactor developer. You've got medical isotopes, and then you are now currently involved in ensuring that supply of HALEU. Can you tell us a little bit about that domestic supply and what you're doing about it?
Absolutely. First of all, I'd like to thank the Texas Nuclear Alliance for having TerraPower today. And it's our pleasure to sponsor, in part, this conference and to be a member of the TNA. And we really appreciate Reed, I don't know where he is right now, for bringing us in. And if it's all right, I might just provide just a really quick business update for you just before we touch upon HALEU. Yeah, just to note that we're building America's next reactor in the state of Wyoming right now. We're moving dirt on the site, and we're in the queue with the NRC for our construction permit. And we do expect to get the permission to do nuclear construction in 2026, in the second half of 26. And we fully intend to have our reactor loading fuel in 2030. So that's point number one. Point number two is we're very focused on our supply chain. And in point of fact, we have around 80% of our nuclear supply chain is already awarded. And when I look around this room today, although I can't name names, I see some of our partners in here, which makes me pretty happy for our company right now. The third thing is we're really focused on our book of business in the 2030s. And we have a design that is more simple, that is cheaper to build, safer to operate, and easier to maintain. That's our design philosophy. And we are producing power and heat, and we are prioritizing Texas as a market of interest for a lot of the reasons that were already touched upon by our friends from Vistra here. So we don't need to go into that anymore. But specifically on HALEU, it's a real shame that there isn't a company in America with domestically owned and controlled technology that can produce HALEU. We're in the market very much, and we've assessed everything. And that means the Western enrichers, obviously the Russians, the Chinese, the fabled Brazilian enrichers. I mean, we've looked at it all. But at the end of the day, we want to be in the DOE program, and so we do expect to get some HALEU from DOE. But we also had to make a commercial decision to take some leadership to get our first core. And not only our first core, but reloads and subsequent cores. And so a couple weeks ago, we announced a deal with ASP Isotopes. That's a NASDAQ-listed U.S. company with a branch in South Africa. And we will be sourcing our initial core from South Africa, from an ASP facility. And that is not to say that we're not interested in the U.S. Production, because we 1,000% are, including, if possible, from Texas. But, we have a board, we're running a business. I'm sure everyone here can appreciate that, and we have to do what's best for us right now to make sure we can deliver on time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeff. Just as a follow-up question, what do you see as the timeline for the HALEU production, both domestically and maybe in some of countries that are sort of friendly to the United States?
So domestically, yeah. If someone wants to challenge me on this, they're welcome. But we personally, we don't see production coming online in America before 2030. That's our assessment. We also see a fairly robust HALEU market by the mid-2030s that would include a number of Western enrichers, including hopefully production right here in the United States. And that would produce the same type of market we have for LEU, which is diversity of supply, price competition, stability. That's what we want. But our guess is that the market will fully solidify in the early 2030s.
Great. And if I can add to that, I think there's going to be some competition for sites for some of these new facilities. So, talking about Texas, there could be some interesting opportunities here. I don't know if you agree.
Absolutely. Yeah, we would love to see not only enrichment in Texas, but conversion. I mean, mining is an obvious point, but conversion, we all know it's a major bottleneck, and we need another facility in America. I always felt like Texas could be a good place for that, in addition to enrichment.
Well, now let's go to the back end of the fuel cycle. So this is always an interesting one. Feels like the back end has been a bit of an albatross around the industry's neck for a long time, right? The anti-nuclear activists, once you address the safety issues, the non-proliferation issues, the cost, they'll still come back at you and they'll say, what about the waste? What about the spent fuel? But the great thing about all the excitement with new nuclear technologies and developing all of these new solutions is that I think people are generally more open to innovative solutions. So, Carl, can you talk about a bit of what you're doing at Exodys and how you're trying to solve this issue?
Thank you, Elina, and obviously thank you to all those who are in attendance. I have to say that having been to many nuclear conferences, it's very rare to see all of the stakeholders involved in the process in the same room. And so I think this is going to be a particularly productive set a couple of days. But, you know, last but not least, the waste. But in reality, as you said, Elina, the waste is usually the leading argument when you're speaking to an anti-nuke. And when you're speaking to someone who's pro-nuclear, it's usually the last thing they talk about. But what's really interesting about fuel is that we only use 5% of it. So there's 95% of the untapped potential. So if you were to use the 90,000 tons of spent nuclear fuel in the United States, you'd actually have centuries of power from that. So what's really important to know is that we actually have an additional uranium mine, which is our waste stockpile, because every year we generate 2,000 metric tons of spent nuclear fuel. In fact, it's a bit more than that, but there's roughly 2,000 metric tons of uranium. So, you know, and we were talking about this with the pounds and metric ton conversion, so hopefully we won't go too crazy on that today. But when you look at the current capacity, we're really at 5% of what we need on an annual basis in the United States. So there's enormous opportunity for growth, whether at the mine, but as you were mentioning, fuel is not just about buying it at the mine. You then need to convert it, you then need to enrich it, and in fact, utilities buy all the uranium that they need to make their fuel. So it's roughly 7 to 1, so let's say they want to make 100 tons of fuel for their reactor that's enriched under 5%, you're going to need 7 tons up to 9 tons of uranium concentrate from the ground to make that. So typically what they do is they buy all the uranium that they need, they then pay a conversion fee, then an enrichment fee, a deconversion fee, and then a fuel fab fee. So it's a really interesting supply chain, and it's one in which there could be a lot of participants who, again, are generating a lot of value. Now, when it comes to Exodys, the reason why we have a raison d'etre of being here, first of all, I was actually anti-nuclear at first. My father protested against the construction of nuclear power plants in the 70s. But the chief argument was the waste, actually. And when you take a look at what we do at Exodys, we're trying to develop deployable recycling facilities. So in France, we have La Hague, which is a centralized recycling facility, and a lot of people speak about that facility as being an example for the world. What's interesting is they have a process called Purex, in which they basically take the spent nuclear fuel and make a mixed oxide fuel that not all reactors can actually use. And then guess what? You have countries like Belgium who sit there and say, well, now that we use the MOX, what do we do with the used MOX? And Russia is the only country actually that can re-enrich that used MOX by doping it with high-enriched uranium. So without getting into too many technical details, Exodys actually started up by recycling used MOX at Idaho National Lab. And the reason for that is because we use a pyroprocessing system, and we basically fit what would have been in 6 buildings in 9 standard shipping containers. One of the advantages of decentralized recycling and doing it at an existing site, for example, is that there's a Part 50 license, that you have all the radioactive material handling equipment, but more importantly, you have the capital assets that are the most expensive at a La Hague, such as a spent fuel pool. And so it's incredible when you see the cathedrals that our nuclear power plants are, and the amazing built environment that they actually possess, including the decommissioning trust fund that can pay for it, but that's a whole other issue. But ultimately, what we do at Exodys is we design these decentralized recycling systems. We're standing on the shoulders of giants in terms of technology that's been developed in the last 30, 40 years. But it's not as easy as saying, let's just recycle. At Idaho National Lab, you actually have a facility to recycle, in the fuel cycle facility, but it wouldn't even be able to take a full 17 by 17 fuel bundle. So when we created this company, we had a lot of talent that came from the Naval Reactor Program, and a lot of experience in nuclear system development, but we also complemented that with former operators from La Hague. And I have to say, what a culture clash, even if I'm French and American myself. But I think recycling did not happen because the price of uranium was so low, and there was no real incentive to do that. And the other thing is, the demand was not going too high. We thought we were shutting down nuclear power plants. So there's a real why now moment for recycling, because the price of uranium is high, because we don't have enough uranium. And in that waste stockpile, you basically have 95% of the material that's uranium that can be reconverted, re-enriched, but you actually have 2% of that volume that possesses uranium, plutonium, and minor actinides, which neutronically could be the equivalent of HALEU. And so recycling is not just a solution to be able to recircularize existing light water reactor fuel back into those light water reactors and provide a fuel alternative, but it's also actually a potential source of advanced reactor fuel. specifically for the fast neutron spectrum, such as TerraPower's systems. So I went into a couple of directions because I just wanted to go back a bit on what the fuel cycle is, but did I answer your question correctly?
Yeah, absolutely. But what I'd love to know, kind of, what do you see as a trajectory for this technology? How is the implementation going to work?
The reason why we opted for decentralized recycling solutions is because we really have trouble seeing how the NRC's process today can license just a greenfield, newly sited recycling facility. There's still some rulemaking that needs to happen. But what's very interesting is if you apply for a license amendment request and modify 4 to 6 areas of a Part 50 license at a current facility, you would actually be able to bring a recycling system there. So again, really using that built environment, I think, is going to be the quickest way to get it up and running. And once we've proved to the public that we can recycle, I think that's when maybe there'll be some more regulation for a centralized facility. But frankly, there's no point in going for a centralized facility if you don't have the order book to justify it. And even La Hague and the Mayak Chemical Combine in Russia, the 2 centralized recycling facilities in the world, well, they're actually not profiting. If they were run by private companies, they'd go bankrupt. So when you're right-sizing the amount of modules to this amount of spent fuel that's on site and that's going to be generated, you're now less inclined to overbuilding. And I think that's why these decentralized methods may be the first ones out the gate.
Yeah, I love to hear that, because the mantra for so many years has been, well, we don't want to recycle because it's just too expensive. But if you don't even look at the commercial options and on how to do it cheaper, then you will never arrive at them, right? So it's really exciting to hear what you're doing.
And one last point on that, if you're a utility, first of all, your stock price is undervalued relative to where it should be, because on that 10K, there's always that, and there's a spent nuclear fuel disposal, and we're still awaiting the government. So if you solve the spent nuclear fuel issue, you could easily see a 10 to 20% increase. I mean, we saw how the data center announcements with some of the advanced reactor vendors just made the entire industry go up, even projects that had nothing to do with it. So I think that would be a major boon for the industry as a whole. But if you're a utility, you need to think about this as you have billions of dollars of uranium in your parking lot that either you can sell or that you could reuse. And so if you have high prices of uranium, you may want to sell it, or you may want to use it. If you have low prices, you may want to buy it from the mine, keep that one. So it just empowers utilities to do way more with their spent fuel than just sue the government to get reimbursed for storing it.
Absolutely. Thank you, Carl, for that perspective. So I'm going to throw out a broad question to all of the panelists, and for each one of you, the answer will probably be a little bit different. But what do you see as the biggest challenge today for your part of the business and the biggest opportunity? Start with you, Paul.
I'll get started over here. For the biggest challenge we have for getting started, really, outside of, I think we solved the market issues that were the signals we needed to have to be able to start advancing our projects. So we're kind of beyond that now. Now it's about sustaining that growth, and where we see that sustaining issue, where we see the sustainment issues is that principally is we have to continue permitting and licensing new facilities or expanding those new expansion areas, and that is a process that's kind of out of our control. And so we need basically a proactive approach to permitting and a proactive and licensing as well. I'd say in Texas we have a really strong, long, mature regulatory regime here that is tailored to advancing at least the permitting and licensing process. But they're also hampered by the fact that recruiting good people to keep them in place, and that's where we've got a bunch of policy and legislators here that want to raise it. Don't forget about our agencies. If they're part of the growth we're going to talk about economic growth of Texas, we need to make sure agencies are properly staffed and get quality people to keep this momentum we've got going right now. But I see that as a kind of when I look at it, the near-term side of it is really the people side, both on the company side, are finding good quality people for us, but also to allow our regulators to continue to grow, because none of us are getting any younger. And we need to bring new people into this industry. I saw a bunch of young people out in the hallway. They were helping us register and all that. This is a great opportunity, whether it's uranium, nuclear power, new technologies, and even on the recycling side, there's a lot of opportunities here.
Yeah, I echo Paul's comments. I think one of our greatest challenges is finding skilled people to come back into the uranium mining industry. So back in 2016, 17, 18, operations across the U.S. were put into care and maintenance, and a lot of the people that worked in those industries either retired or they left and moved on to other things. Different metals, different industries altogether. And so, you go to restart, and finding talented people is a challenge for us, as well as simple things like contractors. So, we drill a lot of water wells to develop the mine, and historically they've been a lot of small businesses that had maybe 1, 2 drilling rigs. And you would have multiple contractors working at a mine site, and the drilling rig units are still available, but the people that operated them have moved on to other things. But I also think that's probably our greatest opportunity. So Paul and I were at a conference in Denver, the Uranium Recovery Workshop in the spring, and it was a sea of white hair across the conference room. A lot of us are older that have been in the business for a while. And so I think that the real opportunity is we're bringing in the next generation and training a new generation of people that, quite frankly, are very excited about nuclear and where things are going. And, there was a time in my career where I would have, somebody asked what I was doing, and I said I worked in uranium mining, and they would look at me a little odd, but it's become more acceptable because nuclear is now more acceptable, and it's such a refreshing change. So I think that's our real opportunity.
Great. Jeff?
Thank you. Yeah, I would say on the challenges side, a couple of things. One, and I think every developer in this room would probably nod their head when I say this, we want to avoid the pitfalls of Vogtle, right? We 1,000% do, which means we want to fully finish our design before we start construction and just take the lessons learned from that project and never repeat that again, right? That's number one. Number two is, I would say, finance for first units. I mean, of course, we have a very committed lead investor in Bill Gates. There's no getting around that, and we have a committed board, but nonetheless, it's an all-equity play for us in Kemmerer, Wyoming, and there are some serious cash needs that all developers would have to bring their technology to market. That's number two. And the third one is for us, we're actually the developer, we're managing the EPC, we're bringing the tech, we're doing everything. It's not a business model that we want to repeat, and we're in the process of identifying some partners so that we can streamline our division of responsibilities going forward. On the positive side, I just look at our technology, and we just know, because our energy delivery system is not subject to the NRC regulations, our energy island I'm specifically referencing, and the fact that we can ramp power at 10% a minute, which no other vendor on the market or coming to market can do. We just have a significant amount of market opportunity across the board, not only in America, but globally. So we're very excited about that.
Excellent. Carl?
So on the challenge, I really want to echo the remark on talent. Because we need a lot of human capital, and not just engineers. We need policymakers, anthropologists, accountants, financial engineers, because as you can see, the challenges that we face are really on a multiple or panoply of different topics. And I'll just give an example, but in northern New York, we've been speaking with the Onondaga Nation, which is very anti-nuclear. They're willing to revisit their position if what we say about recycling is true. And so it's incredible how just, with anthropological strategies, you can actually get a lot done for the space. But in terms of challenges, it's just being honest as an industry. Obviously, we're all trying to be selling our different solutions. Recycling is not easy. Even just devising a method to open a welded cask, pull it out, tilt it, chop it into 2.5 centimeter lengths is not trivial. So I think if we have all these different stakeholders in the room, constant communication, report on progress, that is going to be a very important indicator of how we are as an industry, if we're mature enough to actually deliver on the promise that we want to come up with. But in terms of opportunities, I think Texas really stands in a unique position, whether it's the markets, how ERCOT is structured, the different entities that are in here, the fact that you have a lot of heavy industry in the state, but also the fact that it's been proposed as one of the states to host an interim storage site. for waste. Now, if I were a Texan, I would not want to be the de facto federal waste repository for the United States. But if I knew that it would come with recycling and that we could become a capital of fuel production, not just in the United States, but in the entire world, that's a very different value proposition. And so I think even putting stipulations such as, well, we'll only accept it if there's recycling, or those type of opportunities could really bear fruit in the state.
I love the theme of turning the challenges into opportunities. I think that's great. So I can ask questions all day, but I'd really love to open it up to the audience and see if anyone has any questions for our great panelists. All right, I see a question in the back.
Yeah, I guess from the standpoint of why Texas wouldn't want to be an interim storage site, it sounds, when you said, if I were in Texas, I wouldn't want to be an interim storage site. It sounds like you think that that would be an unsafe role for Texas to have. Do you think interim storage of used fuel is unsafe? Or why would Texas not want to host that?
So I have every financial incentive to say that nuclear waste is not safe. But it is. so I definitely want to nip that in the bud. And it's very well taken care of. It's just a really untapped economic potential. Frankly, again, I came from a formerly anti-nuclear background, so I came in with a lot of misconceptions that had to be addressed. I even found out that it wasn't green slime. That's basically just a pile of metal tubes. But what I do think is, if you're going to be hosting this type of site, you're going to be generating jobs to be able to build it in the first place. But then after it's there, and there's not necessarily as many jobs that you're keeping. So when I say that I wouldn't want it, it's more from an economic value perspective than it is from a safety. Because again, it's completely safe. But it would just be so unfortunate to just put these and wait to send them up to Yucca Mountain. Might as well make a recycling facility, take that fuel and recategorize it. I mean, 95% of the material that's in it should not even be in a dry cask. It could be in an oil barrel. So did I answer your question correctly? Or okay, perfect.
Great, we've got a few minutes for more questions, if anyone has any. Everyone's so quiet this morning. Oh, I see one question.
There's one over there.
Please. Did everyone hear the question? Magic lamp with 2 wishes, 1 wish from the federal government, 1 wish from the state government? Who wants to start?
Well, that's a pretty heavy question there.
Paul wants 3 wishes.
The third one being, can I have 2 more? But I'd say that from the federal government would be the reality. I guess from the federal government is do more to promote the industry as a nuclear industry to support the growth there. But we don't need help at the uranium production level. We have a lot of roadblocks in our way with respect to developing new projects, and particularly on federal lands where there's federal permitting and everything else. That it's created quite a bit of a burden for us to move forward, such that that's why we like working in Texas and Wyoming, is because they're agreement states under the Atomic Energy Act. Because we can deal, if we got problems, we can go to Austin or to Cheyenne and work with people who actually have a vested interest in advancing or the living in the state and the economy of the state. When you go to White Flint and Rockville, Maryland, it's a much more different conversation. I'm not saying that NRC is at fault, but they have a lot of regulations that have a tendency to be very difficult to find pathways forward. And we have the same issue with federal land. So we don't need all the help if we can get by with less help from the federal government. On the state side, I think I chimed in earlier that I would like to see more resources put into onto the oversight, the regulatory programs in the state, because to hire good, talented people. Just like as Brent mentioned at the workshop in Denver, there's a whole lot of gray hair in that place. we don't have enough gray hair in the tech and the state agencies now. We've got a bunch of young people. We've lost kind of a generation of people who can kind of mentor and coach. We need to get talented people in there because we don't have an issue with how the state's regulating us. It's really about getting enough bandwidth because we're moving so fast and there's so much work that has to be done. We see that as a challenge. So my wish, back to your original question, my wish to the federal government, less, and to the state legislature, more.
Great. Anyone else for the two wishes?
Well, I would say the top line wish for the federal government would be a smooth transition from this party to the next. And in connection with that, let's keep the LPO for nuclear. Let's keep the IRA for nuclear, okay? And let's work on construction and cost overrun insurance, all right? Those are the three. That's kind of one wish with some subparts to it. And then on the state level, I would say let's just keep pushing on stakeholder relations because that's important, and maybe some early incentives and early works for siting because that cost of capital is quite high pre-LNPT. Thank you.
So from the federal government, my wish would be for them to basically say, okay, $500,000 or $1 million per metric ton, private sector, give us a solution for the waste problem. Because I think at that moment you'll see more than a couple of recyclers existing, as well as other types of companies. So that's on the federal side. On the state side, I have to say you have been making the right moves. If I were to be here 2 years ago, I'd basically wish everything that you guys have done, whether it's the establishment of a working group, being able to actually get together in different subgroups on specific issues. A lot of these working groups, it's you have the advanced reactor vendors with the waste managers, with the utilities, it's a bit of a hodgepodge of everyone, and you don't get as much done. But Texas was really able, through its working group, to actually get these separate conversations happen in parallel. And I really think that continuous communication with the different stakeholders is going to lead us to a point where we're actually going to have an action plan. Because even here to say, oh, accept the waste so then you can recycle is still too soon. We really need to understand, what does Texas want out of nuclear, beyond just generation capacity, in terms of employment, in terms of workforce, in terms of innovation. And you see some of the universities, whether it's ACU or Texas A&M or UT, these are all some of the hubs of the best talent in the space. So not much to ask from the state right now.
Great. Well, get the last word.
All right, so I would have one wish, and it's the same for both the federal government and state government, and that's invest in research and development. So during the last uranium downturn, I actually left the uranium industry. I worked in the rare earth industry for a while. And as a result of investment in R&D, there's a processing and separation plant that is constructed and coming into operation in northeast Wyoming. And it's the latest, greatest technology for separation of rare earths that wouldn't have happened without that investment. And so, like Paul said, I don't think we need help at the uranium mining level. We need less help in some cases. But for some of the advanced technologies, I'd like to see more R&D.
Great, thank you so much, Brent. Well, I think this closes our panel really nicely. I'd really like to thank all of our panelists for bringing their perspectives, giving us more information about all that's happening across the fuel cycle, including opportunities right here in Texas. Thank you so much.